Welcome to Spilled Ink.
Welcome back to another episode of Spilled Ink. As I think if you happen to be listening, and I don't know if you are, but there's a theme developing here where I have people on who I have to say thank you to. And today's guest, Dean Rutz, photographer at the Seattle Times, I owe a very huge thank you to. And Dean, I don't even know if you remember this moment, but I was working for the University of Washington, and it was Coach Pete's first year, and we're at Hawaii. And I have a camera. I don't know what I'm doing with it. As the game is starting, we're in the end zone, and I say, "Hey, how do I get it so that the people's hands aren't blurry?" And you said, "Here, give me your camera." You went doot doot doot, and then like the next play, Jeff Lindquist throws a bomb to John Ross, and that was the first action photo that I took. And it was like, looking back on it, I was like, man, that was a terrible photo. But at the time, I was like, man, like I know what I'm doing now.
I don't remember that story, but that's pretty funny.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you.
My
And
pleasure.
and I thought that was so cool for somebody who, was obviously being paid to be there and create images to take, and it could have ended very badly, right? Like if it had been 10 seconds later and no one gets the shot, then I would have felt very bad. So, again, thank you for doing that. And with that being said, how have you been? How are things going in this crazy photography world that we're in now?
Oh, it is crazy. I will say that there's been, so many changes in the industry, both in publishing, but also in imaging. The cameras are changing radically, incredibly fast. The technology is spinning out of control. I'm doing a lot of work on the side with Fuji right now. I think I've mentioned that in the past, and they're involved or looking at some new technological developments that I think are really going to be industry quaking, and for people like yourself in terms of having live broadcasts, live podcasts, things where for all of us, I think, where we're trying to publish as quickly to online as possible so we can be competitive. It's going to have real ramifications, I think, down the road. And it's going to spread to other platforms as well. It's not going to be a Fuji thing exclusively.
Yeah. Now, can you provide any more? Is it super top secret, or can you share a little bit?
Most of it, there is a non-disclosure, but
Yeah.
the short of it was I started with Fuji about 3 years, whenever it was the Kraken were in the Stanley Cup. They had just worked out a deal with Frame.io and Adobe to create a technology that went right from the camera to online, right to a server of sorts, where collaboratively you could work with editors, and the stuff could be stored instantly as you're shooting it. And I was one of the first ones to kind of use that technology. I was the first one, I guess, from what I've heard, to figure out what didn't work in it. And I ended up writing something that became a white paper for Adobe. It wasn't intended to be. It was intended to be a series of emails complaining about how this thing didn't work correctly. But it turned into a white paper that got distributed very heavily within Adobe and led to a lot of changes. And this new technology that's going to come down soon, where we're going to see images flying out of the camera. It's something that National Geographic has been playing with as well too. This Frame.io cloud-based structure, where when they're working in areas that are a little more rough and dangerous for them, as they're shooting images, they're instantly being transmitted up to the editor, so that if they lose the camera or something happens, the take is preserved. We're going to go one step beyond that now, I think, with the new technology, adding a fourth company into the process. But we're still in the development and talking stages of what that's really going to have to look like.
That's super cool. And for anyone who's not a photographer, has been, I think, one of the hardest things in this evolving world is how do you get images where they need to go faster? And I guess as well as FTP has worked, or straight camera to phone, in certain situations. That has always been a problem. So it's super cool to hear about that. Now I have to ask, because I know that you're a Fuji guy now. You were Canon were you Canon?
Yeah, and I still am. I
Okay.
am ambidextrous.
Okay.
Maybe that's the way to look at it,
Mhm.
or platform agnostic. I use both
Mhm.
because both platforms are lagging in places, and both platforms have certain advantages that the other one doesn't. So I've found that I can use them both simultaneous to get the result that I want. Now, Canon has just introduced a piece of software called Content Transfer Professional that has addressed some of the issues that we've been talking about with them, where you can use your smartphone now to FTP out.
Mhm.
Uh, so there are some good things there too. But yeah, I'm using both platforms. Canon's introducing some new glass, which we're finally buying this year, that 100 to 300 2.8 that will address some big problems.
Yeah. God.
Um, so yeah, I use both, and I like both, and I like that neither company has made me commit to the other.
Mhm.
They're willing to let me mess around with Sony or Nikon or whatever I want to do because they get good intel back. I think that's
Mhm.
what they trust me, is because I'm agnostic on what I'm using. I'm just using it for whatever reason works best, and
Mhm.
that intel comes back to Tokyo, I think, for both of these companies.
Mhm. Yeah, that's by the way, can you hear my dog?
No,
Okay, good. Just had she's barking in the garage, and so I just wanted to like make sure because I know that they have that, kind of the noise canceling. So if it becomes a thing, I can, hit a quick pause and go take care of her. But
hopefully you
uh,
won't hear mine. I've
yeah.
got three right here.
Um, and I think, one of the things that's interesting, so I kind of dabbled with Fuji for a minute. I bought the XT2 when it first came out, really liked it. It's the only foray I've made into mirrorless.
Mm.
And over time, and I'm sure that it's come a long way, but over time, I, and it's crazy to think this because I just upgraded to the camera that it was like my dream camera, and now it's so outdated that it's like almost sad. But I have three 1DX Mark IIs.
Oh yeah.
And I still love them. I love the way the images come out, and and it kind of suits my style, I think. After a while, I was like, there were situations where I didn't love like the look of some of the mirrorless stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm gonna say this, and you're probably gonna make me really sad, but how far has the technology come, and how much am I missing out on?
You're missing out on a lot. The tech has really grown both on both platforms. The R line in Canon is the thing that if you're doing sports, you're going to like the most, is the tracking focus has just, it's night and day improved.
Mhm.
And Canon, particularly in the 1DX line, always had a color bias,
Mhm.
uh, particularly on darker complected athletes, where it shifted to the purple,
Mhm.
particularly in shadows. And Canon has fixed a lot of that, where the
Okay.
tones are a little bit more neutral and honest. Fuji, in particular, too, going from the XT2, we're up to the T5 now, and on the XH line, it is very competitive with the three primary companies in terms of its ability to track, focus, generate an extremely pleasant image, and bring some new lenses to the fore that we hadn't seen
Mhm.
in previous iterations. So a lot has changed, but so has the price point too.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I've liked Fuji is their commitment. They're trying to pivot right now, or at least that's what Tokyo had told me, to news and sports,
Mhm.
because they see an opportunity, I think, to undercut Canon and Sony in particular. The price point would come out to 50 to 60%
Oh
of
wow.
what those lines are, which makes it much more approachable for the average guy, but also for a lot of papers that just don't have the kind of budget that metros do.
Mhm.
So the potential there is very good,
Mhm.
but you got to go with what you feel most comfortable with, that you can afford, because there's no point in buying a camera and being limited in what you can do. So
Yeah.
there are some real trade-offs.
Yeah, that's been my, the thing that I go back and forth constantly is like, do I buy more lighting? Do I switch over to mirrorless? Like, where am I going to find $10,000?
Exactly.
And and my thing, like, I was committed to moving to the R line, and then I just heard enough about the adapter for like the glass that I have is just not, it just is like maybe a tick off where I would want it to be. So I don't know if you've heard anything about that or.
Yeah, there's two actual adapters to go EF to R.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a higher end one. It's not that much more expensive. It actually pretty much keeps the native application of that lens on the R body of that old EF lens
Okay.
because it has extra pins on it. That's
Okay.
the big difference.
Mhm.
The way it was described to me from Canon was it had twice the number of pins so that the amount of data could be transmitted to the body
Okay.
allowed the EF lens to perform like it would natively on the 1DX.
Okay. Well, that's good news. Okay. I like this. I like this. Yeah. Um, yeah, because I like definitely, and then there's do I want to shoot more games or do I do more portrait work? And what's the client? Obviously, you're in a little bit different situation because, you have the paper, right? And I have what do I need to get to give the most to my clients and not be poor.
Well, that's the key because, as you well know, rates are not what they used to be.
No.
Photography is a hard place to make a real good living, and because we were artists in the film era, nobody had a darkroom. It was a
Mhm.
very limited technology, so you got paid better for
Mhm.
that reason. But once autofocus, auto exposure, Photoshop, all that stuff came along, boy, it really changed the craft. Although craftsman is still a craftsman,
Mhm.
a lot of companies really appreciate. Um, you can see the difference in a guy who knows what he's doing. You can see it
Mhm.
in the fidelity and the color, the composition, and how they use the cameras. So there are still some people that'll pay for that,
Mhm.
but a lot of people are just willing to accept less in the Instagram and social media generation.
Do you think though, and maybe I'm just being hopeful, but it feels like there is a bit of a shift to where people have their iPhones, maybe they have their own camera, but I mean, I don't know, like when I was growing up, even, just a little disposable camera, just the quality of those images, right? As they were just honest, right? And that was a better memory, I think, than some of the iPhone photos people take now. And my sense of it is that we're kind of in a shift back to a little more of an analog situation. I mean, it's still digital, but people actually want those well-composed images for posterity.
Yes and no. There's certainly a push for honesty because if you go onto Facebook, there's so much AI generated imaging there. You can't believe a lot of what you're seeing there, but you'll believe it in a trusted source.
Mhm.
And because you know that those guys are analog thinkers, they really want the honest image. They take a certain pride in that. But the ability in both the iPhone and in software to create extremely pleasing images and self-flattering images. Everybody
Mhm.
looks so much better. The right filter.
Mhm.
It distorts the other half of it, that TikTok generation, or not so much Instagram, but there's a little bit of it there. But boy, I am really stunned by the stuff I see on Facebook now that is just so outrageously fake
Yeah.
that I don't look at it much anymore. But I do gravitate to the people that I know and trust, and I appreciate them more.
Mhm. Um, and I could keep going on this track all day long. I'm sure that like most people don't care. They're like the few photographers on my Instagram feed are gonna be like, wow, this is amazing. And, so to go back to sort of why we do this, what are some of your favorite, I guess, maybe like favorite photos you've taken and favorite either teams or athletes that you've been able to photograph?
I don't really. The God's honest truth is I hate my own work. I don't look at it after I shoot it. Pretty much, I'll look at it. I'll enjoy it maybe for that moment, but After that, it's dead to me.
Mhm.
Karen complains all the time. You can go through our house and there are no photographs on the walls. Certainly nothing I shot except maybe of her.
Mhm.
Uh, it's funny. I think what it means for me, and it's partly age and experience now, is I'm transitioning away from pictures to the experience now
Mhm.
of being present. And so that's why these teams like, the Mariners and the Seahawks and the Huskies in particular um, have been so much fun to hang around because I'm looking at them in a different way. I'm not so self-conscious now like we all were when we started. Oh my God, I'm going to get beat.
Yeah.
You're so stressed out that you can't enjoy the experience. And now I'm enjoying the experience a
Mhm.
tremendous amount. Um, so photographically, there have been some fun things that I've done. One of my favorite experiences was the Mariners sweeping Toronto in the first playoff game in decades
Mhm.
up in Toronto. That was a fantastic experience. It was unexpected. We all went there expecting them to get swept.
Mhm.
Instead, the other way went around, and I was completely unprepared for that. Uh, if you go back and look at, I think it's on my Times portfolio page, that catch that Tyler Lockett makes in the corner of the end zone,
Mhm.
was just on toes, falling out of bounds.
Mhm.
Lucky break on that, but that's a nice picture. Uh,
Mhm.
most of the stuff I've done in the Olympics over the years has been just a lot of fun too, because they're just so genuine, and that's partly why I like sports so much. The moments are authentic, they're
Mhm.
genuine, especially at the amateur level. People are real.
Mhm.
A pro, okay, we lost today. We got 82 more games in the NBA season, so who cares?
Mhm.
The high school or the collegiate athlete, the clock is ticking on my career. This means a lot to me,
Mhm.
and so they're a lot more fun to be around, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, that's kind of where I mean, my whole career, I've always ended back on prep sidelines. And there was a lot of time where I don't think I appreciated it, where I was like, I gotta get to the pros, or I gotta get here. And then, especially like particularly photographically, I just really enjoy getting to create images with those kids. The exception to that, I will say, are several people like Kelsey Plum. She
Yes.
was amazing to photograph, and really let me try some things that helped me now. Um, and so yeah, I totally appreciate what you're saying about it being about the experience, right?
Kelsey she's a good story because, when she was really thriving at the UW and on the verge of setting the NCAA scoring record, she would come back into the workroom after a game, and she'd peek over my shoulder and look at the pictures, and she'd look at the pictures of herself, and we'd have a conversation about it. It was not like she was self-conscious. She was really curious about what you were doing, and
Mhm.
just the sweetest person in the world. And those are the types of athletes that you enjoy working around because, again, they just make the experience pleasant.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and I guess, ultimately, I mean, I think that's what keeps us in it, right? Like if it was just work, there's not enough financial reward to just do it for that, right?
Well, I hope Ken Griffey Jr. is appreciating the misery that he put us through when he was an athlete. Because now he photographed the Masters. I don't know if you saw that, and you
I
saw the
did, yeah.
photograph. He got a great picture out of the Masters. But if he was treated the way that he treated a lot of us, he was impatient. He didn't enjoy the experience. He would blow us off all the time. If he experienced that now, I think he would understand, oh man, it's just so unnecessary. But I also understand when you get to the pro level too, the demands on you are extraordinary. Everybody wants a piece of you.
Mhm.
I've got Bobby Knight stories from college that are just frightening. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, I understand the push and pull pro athletes feel, but the collegiate athletes haven't hit that yet, and they're still willing, and prep athletes in particular, to experiment because it's fun
Mhm.
for them.
So it's interesting that you bring up Junior, and I have conflicted feelings about Ken Griffey Jr., the photographer,
Oh
right?
yes,
Um,
everybody does.
Yeah, like, and he was my favorite, between Reggie Miller and Ken Griffey Jr., my two favorite athletes of all time. Well, Steve Largent, get the big three there for me. And so Randy Johnson to me like really tried to like really became like passionate about the craft of photography, I
Yeah.
think. Just based on what I've seen. To
Mhm.
me, Griffey's more like the parent on the sideline with the really nice camera that, can get some great images, but just kind of does it as a hobby. And there's nothing wrong with that, respect to anyone who wants to do that. But like, I don't know. I don't know if we need to, I don't know if we need the TV story about that
Yeah.
every time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. When he first started off, he was just there to photograph Trey. You
Hmm.
find him in an Arizona game, he's just photographing his kid, and that's all it is.
Hmm.
The fact that he actually worked for the Masters or for the PGA this time around, that was a surprise to me. That
Hmm.
would he want to subject himself to essentially editors and publishing, because
Hmm.
that he relinquishes control. He likes control over his work and his time.
Hmm.
And obviously he hates being photographed on the sideline. He wants to be a regular guy now, but he still doesn't quite behave like the regular guy.
Exactly.
Yeah, he would yell at me at spring training. There's my friend with the inferior cameras because he was on Nikon, and then all of a sudden he's on Sony. I said, Ken, why are you on Sony now? And he said, well, they made me a deal. So you can see he's still not one of us per se yet.
Yeah.
Maybe he'll get there. I'd be happy if he did, but there's a lot he's going to have to learn about the humility of what you and I do, and it's very humiliating at times.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I'm not sure he's ready for that yet. He's not used to that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, and I am really curious, has there ever been a moment you were talking about, the Tyler Lockett shot? Has there ever been a moment where there was a shot where either a ref's butt or another person, like, like a shot you felt like could have been iconic, but you
Mm.
were either in the wrong spot or someone was blocking you?
I don't know about iconic, but boy, it happens all the time, every stinking game, especially now in the NHL because we're limited to the holes on the ice, and the ref parks right in front of my window half the time
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I'm kind of on the blue, well, not quite the blue line, but on the goal line pretty much, and that's where he's watching, and I can't get around him.
Hmm.
I've had that happen so many times. Referees in the NFL or wherever just block you. The worst is basketball typically
Hmm.
because they seem to drift into the same spot on the lane. And if that's your spot, you're cursed the whole game.
Hmm.
You're just done.
I try to be kind about it, but sometimes I feel like at the high school level, they start to do it on purpose because they're annoyed with you.
Yes, I think that's true.
Yeah. And
Ron might be one of the few officials who gets it and tries to
mhm.
stay out of the way.
It's funny that you say that because I was at a game, a playoff game this year. It's one of the few that I was at where Rod was officiating, and he came up to me and he's like, "Hey, did I make the right call there?" And then and then in another timeout, I walked up to him and I was like, here's the call. You got it right." And it was just like I would have never approached anyone else,
Oh no.
to do that during a game. And
Anybody else would have tossed you.
yeah, exactly. Well, but since he did ask, and it's I don't know, it's really interesting. I think, for me personally, and one of the reasons why like I always enjoy talking to you on the sidelines is I have had, I think, there was a time when I first started where I was like, oh, I'm really good at, like you get started and you make some good images and you're like, oh, I'm so good. Like this is good. I could do anything. And then you like kind of like, oh, actually, no, I'm not that good. And then there's that like constant insecurity when it becomes a thing you do where it's like, do these people respect me, like my peers? And I've always, like for you and John Locke and Rod and anyone else that I came across, it's like, do you guys still see me as a writer or am I like doing it? Like I think, and I'm not asking for praise,
Oh.
but just like, I feel like that's a thing, right? For anyone that's trying to establish themselves.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, especially somebody like yourself. You're moving into an entirely new area of media, and in doing that, you're carrying different disciplines into a game that we don't have to carry.
Mhm.
And you're inventing a medium that we don't have to carry either. So you absolutely belong, and the stuff that you're doing is fantastic. I've kind of gotten over myself a lot over the last decade or two. It's just like, especially, as humbling as sports can be, because when you get beat at a game, a big game, you don't get beat once. You get beat by everybody on the field. 15, 20 different people got the shot you didn't get. And that's very humbling. So you either get over yourself or you just are a pariah, I think. And the teams treat you that way too. I think they can tell when there's a difference between arrogance and confidence, or just wanting to be there. They know you're there to cover them. I do think I get treated well by a lot of the teams because they like me. I don't ask for much. I try to stay in my lane, and when I'm doing portraits or something like that, I don't waste people's time. I try to get it done in a minute or two and let them go. And they like the results. So that's about all you can really ask for. But as far as yourself, you are really embarking on a whole different journey from the rest of us, and it's gonna the outcome is going to be entirely different than what you can probably envision it is right now. So I would never shun anybody for trying that, because you're really on a tightrope.
Yeah, no, it really, I have a vision of what things could look like, and then that could all change tomorrow. And, Substack is no longer a thing. And then I'm like, well, what's the new platform? And, and who's interested in this? And, I think that's part of what I've tried to do is, create images that are, competitive with anybody else in my own style. And also add in that writing piece of it. And I know we're running low on time, but I have to ask, my photography, like the person that I aspire to not be, but create images like, is Platon. I find that he is like to me, he's stunning black and white, and I love it so much. Is there somebody that you would sort of be on your Mount Rushmore of photographers?
There's a bunch of guys, and I've written a little bit about it on my Facebook page recently. When Heinz Klutmeyer died, when Jim Brandenburg died, these were guys that were really instrumental in the formation of my career. David Burnett, though that's my Mount Rushmore probably right there. Less so these days, because I think at a certain point, and you're experiencing it now, as you start to develop your own style, it's your own style, it's your own journey. But those were the guys that showed you the possibilities. Heinz, I just wrote about him recently. I met him when, and he's, for people that don't know, he's one of the great Sports Illustrated photographers who had the great cover from the Miracle on Ice. Right?
Okay.
And Heinz, I met him when I was maybe 18 years old up in West Dallas, Wisconsin, photographing Eric Heiden, who is pretty new that year in speed skating. And I watched Heinz do stuff that, as an 18-year-old, you show up with your camera and your lens and you're just making pictures and you're trying to, just get something in focus. And then I'm watching Heinz come in with a concept. Heiden was wearing for the first time the gold speed skating outfit. And so West Dallas back then, and I think it probably still is, was an outdoor racing venue.
Oh, wow.
With chain link fence all the way around it and streets. So Heinz went out and bought 8-foot seamless rolls of red, white, and blue paper and threw them over the top of the background around the curve, the final curve, so that he would have Heiden reflected in the ice, and then red, white, and blue background, not the chain link. And I'm watching him do this and thinking, I never would have considered something like that. And so he calls me over and he's talking to me about the concept. And he says, here, put your camera right here. You can't shoot Heiden because that's my picture.
Yeah.
But shoot these other guys coming around the corners. See what I see. Use this lens and frame it this way. And for a kid who's like 18, it's like all of a sudden the bells are going off in your head. And I've had that experience with him, with Brandenburg, with Jim Brandenburg. I was just reminded when he was working for the Geographic on the Wolf Project, was sitting in our living room in Bloomington when we were going to Indiana University, looking at our cameras and talking to us about pictures and doing portfolio reviews. I didn't even remember that when we were in college.
Mhm.
And here was a guy who was one of the most brilliant outdoor photographers ever, really moved the whole medium. And to have those guys at that stage of my life, 18 to 22, pretty much. David was the same way. Those are the formative years of your career if you're
Mhm.
doing it like most of us. And to have them there sharing their time without being selfish, without being so all about that,
Mhm.
it changes your life and career and puts you on a particular trajectory where you're no longer part of that subset anymore. Thank you for what you did for me. Now I'm my own journey, but because of you, I'm going to be better than I was. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, there is a Mount Rushmore. I think for all of us, those guys who bring the energy and or the criticism or the inspiration
Mhm.
that sets your mind's eye working in a way that you couldn't do it in school, you couldn't do it with a teacher, you couldn't do it with your friends because they were geniuses and they were so original
Mhm.
that it again as a young person starting in your career to actually have exposure to those people, it just does something that your brain never stops working after that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's so well said. For me, it's funny when I think back because when I was at the Times and we would be at covering things together, writing and you're taking photos, or I'm we're at a portrait shoot and I'm with John Locke or Ellen Banner and we're doing the Star Times photos
Oh yeah.
and I was always so like those were always some of my favorite moments of telling a story. And at the time, like I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. I can't do that, you know? And God bless Steve Sarkeesian for giving me a camera and telling
Yep.
me to figure it out. And then, for your help. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's such I love it so much,
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
There's nothing quite like photography. If you're a writer, I mean, writing is special. It's a craft. It's a talent all of its own. But the reason I got into photography was you have to be present. You
Mhm.
have to be there, witness. You can't do it by phone. You can't cobble together a transcript or something like that. You have to be there. And if you blow it, it's over.
Mhm.
Done. And there's something about being present in the moment that's just special.
Mhm.
And awe-inspiring and intimidating as well. And when you start adding light and color and all these other things, it's just really it's remarkable. I've done a lot of writing in the past. I started it in business as a writer, but this is what I really wanted to do, and I'm so grateful that I'm going to actually make it to the finish line in this career because not many of us will.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and tons of respect for everything that you've accomplished, and thank you for always being that person who's been willing to to share a piece of advice and encouragement and and all that. So, but I do know you got to run, and we're about to get kicked off of here. So, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you.
Feel free to have I'm always looking for a sponsorship. So, Canon, Fuji, if they want to represent me and kick some stuff my way, we'll never say no. Just kidding.
I'll make sure they know.
But yeah, I thank you so much. I'm sure I'll invite you back because there's so many other things I would love to talk about. But yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks, Dean.